A mother dragged across concrete, a child screaming into the night, and her blood left on his shirt, right over his heart. No weapon, no speeding, no raised voice, just a nurse driving home with her son on a quiet street she wasn't supposed to belong to. But to him, she wasn't a mother. She was a profile, a threat, a target in the dark. What he didn't realize, Naomi Reddick wasn't just a name on a report. She was the wife of Elliot Vance, a man with the power to uncover the very map of corruption Maddox had drawn across the city. And that map just lit up. Now ask yourself, if you stay silent, who will speak for you? If your child watched you get hurt, would they grow up afraid or fighting back? This isn't just her story. It's the first testimony of a generation that's done being quiet. Let's begin. Naomi Reddick was the last to leave the parking lot, cradling her 6-year-old son, Zion, in her left arm and carrying a grocery bag in her right. It was late. The earlier rain had left the pavement slick, reflecting the lone fluorescent light spilling from the store's awning. She wore a charcoal gray nurse's uniform, her hair pinned into a bun, dark circles under her eyes from 3 consecutive night shifts at Prescott General. Zion had fallen asleep long ago, his head resting on her shoulder, breathing softly as if to soothe the exhaustion in his mother's chest. Every move Naomi made came from habit, a muscle memory shaped by years of surviving through caution. She opened the car door gently, placed Zion in the back seat, tucked a thin blanket over him, then slid into the driver's seat. The moment her hand reached for the gear shift, 2 headlights swept across her windshield. A white and blue patrol car crept up, stopping abruptly in front of her hood. No siren, no intercom, no official command. Just a hunk of steel branded with authority, appearing as though she'd committed a crime. Naomi held her breath and glanced at the rearview mirror. No one behind. No other cars. Nothing but silence being torn open by a presence advancing toward her. The patrol car door flung open. A white officer stepped out, tall, hulking, his gait hunched as if carrying a built-in bias on his back. He wasn't angry, but the cold in his eyes made the air grow thick. Naomi didn't roll down the window. She kept both hands on the steering wheel. She turned slightly. Zion was still asleep. The blanket hadn't slipped from his shoulder. Through the mirror, she watched the officer approach slowly, as if each step had been rehearsed. At her window, he spoke. "What are you doing in this area at this hour?" His voice wasn't loud but bone dry, a question not meant to discover, but to confirm the suspicion already in his head. Naomi kept her voice steady. "I just finished my shift at the hospital, taking my son home." He gave a slight nod, the kind of nod that scans for inconsistencies. His eyes flicked to the back seat, saw Zion. No reaction. "Registration and license," he ordered. Naomi swallowed, slowly retrieved her wallet from the passenger seat, careful with each movement. She kept one hand on the wheel. Elliot had told her, "Don't argue, don't move fast, don't give them a reason." She passed the documents through a small crack in the window. "Is there a problem, officer?" He didn't answer right away, just stared at her like every breath she took was a trespass. Then his lips curled ever so slightly. "Your kid asleep?" Naomi glanced in the mirror. "Yes, he is." This time, the nod was even smaller, followed by the same question, colder now. "I'll ask again. What are you doing here?" Each word felt like a silent indictment, because she was black, because she was a woman, because she dared to exist here while the city slept. She gripped the wheel tighter and kept her voice composed. "I just got off work. I live on the corner of Elm and Chestnut." Silence lingered. Then came the command that shattered it. "Step out of the vehicle." She froze. I don't understand. What did I do?" "Step out of the car." "Now." Zion stirred, mumbling, "Mama." She turned to calm him, then nodded. "Okay, I'll step out. Just please be gentle, my son." Her sentence was cut short by a violent yank. His hand grabbed her hair, dragging her from the seat like she was garbage. Her chin slammed into the doorframe. Zion screamed. Blood spilled. She couldn't get another word out. Her head hit the freezing pavement. Naomi's cheek scraped hard against the wet sidewalk, burning like fire. She could hear Zion shrieking from the back seat, his little voice shattering. "Stop! Don't hurt my mama!" She tried to turn her head, but a heavy knee pinned her spine to the concrete. The smell of wet cement mixed with blood and dust filled her nose. She didn't scream, didn't resist. She thought only one thing. My child is watching this. Rhett Maddox didn't yell, didn't panic. He leaned in close and whispered like he was reciting procedure. Do not move. You are obstructing a law enforcement officer. She couldn't see his face, only his voice, calm to the point of chilling. One hand held her shoulder down, the other rummaged through her pockets for her phone. No warrant, no cause. He did it because he could. In his mind, this was just another routine check. Zion sobbed in the car, pounding his tiny fists against the window as if he could break through and rescue his mother from this humiliation. Naomi felt blood from her lip drip onto the pavement, and then one drop landed on Zion's shirt as he lunged forward from the back seat. On his dark blue cotton, it left a bright red stain over his chest, right where his small heart trembled. Naomi gasped for air, trying to whisper something, but her throat clenched shut. Maddox didn't stop. He opened the back door, reached inside, and grabbed her wallet and phone from the center console, like he owned the car. No gloves. No warning. Mama, where's the blood from? Zion asked, his small hand reaching out to touch hers, then pulling back as if even his fingers were afraid of the truth. She couldn't answer. Every time she tried to open her mouth, the taste of blood filled her tongue. Her vision blurred, not from pain, but from knowing she was helpless. And in that moment, she realized there was something worse than fear, the humiliation of not being able to protect your child. A second patrol car silently slithered down the street. No sirens, no flashing lights. It arrived the way it always did in these scripts, quiet, rehearsed. Minutes later, Naomi was handcuffed and pulled into the back of a cruiser. Zion was carried out of her car by a young female officer. He squirmed, screaming, "Mama, Mama," but Naomi couldn't turn her head. Her neck was stiff. Her shoulders throbbed. Her mind swirled in a fog of dread. More than anything, she feared the unknown. Where are they taking my child? No one told her. No one read her Miranda rights. No one gave her a reason for the arrest. Just minutes ago, she was a mother heading home after a shift. Now, she was being hauled off like a criminal, in silence, in cold, and into a darkness where no one would catch her fall. Holding cell number 3 at the Caraway Heights Police Department felt like a forgotten tin box. Yellow stains streaked across the ceiling. The clock on the wall froze at 2:17 a.m., as if even time had decided to stop moving. Naomi sat on a freezing metal chair, red marks gouged into her wrists from 6 hours of tight cuffs. No doctor, no inquiry, just a scratched-up plastic cup of water in front of her, untouched. She didn't cry. There were no tears left. Her body felt torn and stitched together with wire. But even worse than the physical pain was the silence, thick, unbroken. No one explained why she had been arrested. No one told her where her son was. A middle-aged officer, round, balding, and casual, walked into the admin room, coffee in one hand, file folder in the other, flipping through it like it was a time-off request. Naomi stared straight at him and spoke for the first time since being cuffed. "I want to see the dashcam footage. Federal policy mandates all civilian traffic stops be recorded." He didn't look up, just shrugged. Unfortunately, the file was corrupted during recording. Memory failure. It's unretrievable. Naomi clenched her hands. "You sure? That's what the report says. You can file a complaint if you want. No backup, no cloud storage, no review." He sighed and finally glanced at her, not with contempt, just blankly. "You think this place has cloud backups? In Caraway Heights, even the clouds know when to disappear." Naomi let out a bitter laugh. Not amused, just exhausted. "So, you lose evidence, and act like it's just another Tuesday." The officer shrugged again. "I didn't lose anything. We just file what the system gives us." She stared at him, eyes sharp as blades. "No one verifies that. Tech team will check. But like I said, overwritten file. Not the first time." Naomi leaned back against the wall, her head hitting peeling paint. Part of her wanted to scream. My child saw everything. A 6-year-old can recount every detail. But the other part knew. Here, a black child's testimony was worth less than a corrupted video file. She asked to speak with Internal Affairs. A desk officer replied plainly, "Systems down from maintenance. Real-time records aren't updating." She asked who was in charge. "Might be the shift supervisor, but there's no command lead tonight." Naomi understood instantly. It wasn't that no one was responsible. It was that no one had to be if they chose not to be. Every answer was a brick in a wall between her and the truth. No cameras, no independent reports, no names of arresting officers, and no right to legal counsel because this wasn't classified as a criminal arrest. It was just an administrative detainment, a gray zone where they could strike, restrain, seize phones, and rip a child from his mother without needing to justify a thing. Naomi sat still, not out of helplessness, but because now she knew she was caught in a loop designed not to deliver justice, but to make the innocent give up. The interrogation room was so silent Naomi could hear the faint flicker of the overhead fluorescent bulb, buzzing like a mosquito, just enough to send a dull ache through her skull. 6 hours of being held without a single explanation. No charges. No notice sent to her husband. She began to understand that, in this place, silence wasn't accidental. It was a tool. A soft weapon, legitimized by paperwork. The door creaked open. A female officer entered. Compact build, blonde hair pulled into a high ponytail, carrying a paper coffee cup and a thin file. No greeting. No small talk. She placed the cup on the table, sat down across from Naomi, and flipped open the file like she was reviewing a library card application. "You're Naomi Reddick?" "Yes." "Age?" 41. "Current address?" "Corner of Elm and Chestnut, Caraway Heights." The officer nodded slightly, wrote nothing down. Then she looked up abruptly, her tone unchanged. "Any witnesses to the incident?" Naomi stared into the pale, eyes across the table. "Only my son. He's 6 years old." For the first time, the officer paused. Her gaze shifted slightly, not quite emotion, but no longer blank. She lowered her eyes to take notes, avoiding Naomi's stare. "All right." Naomi clenched her fists. "I want to call a lawyer." The officer's pen froze. She looked up, the corner of her mouth curling into what might have been a smirk, or something more condescending. "You know the law. I know my rights. Do you now?" She let out a dry, hollow laugh. "Who taught you?" "Some late-night courtroom drama." Naomi didn't respond. She leaned back in her chair, eyes locked onto the woman across from her. "What do you mean by someone like me?" The officer didn't answer, but the silence, thick like cigarette smoke in the room, said everything that needed to be said. Moments later, an administrative worker quietly placed a report in front of her. The first line was bolded. Subject displayed uncooperative behavior. Naomi read each line, like swallowing ice chips down her chest. Refused to exit vehicle when instructed. Exhibited signs of resistance. Disrupted administrative procedure. Every word was a distortion of the truth. She didn't scream. She didn't resist. Not a single insult passed her lips. She had simply existed. And in this place, that alone was enough to be labeled dangerous. Then came a sharp sound from the hallway. A door in the waiting area swung open hard. Everyone in the room turned toward it, except Naomi. She didn't need to look. The instincts of a mother long gone told her something had just happened. A little boy in a pale blue jacket broke free from the grasp of a social worker. "I want to see my mom." "Where's my mom?" "She didn't do anything wrong." Zion, 6 years old, face flushed, shoes still muddy, screaming in the middle of the waiting room like his tiny heart was about to explode. A ceiling camera recorded every second. The officer across from Naomi froze. For the first time, something flickered in her expression, something that looked like doubt. Naomi closed her eyes. A single tear slid free, not from fear, but because in this whirlwind of lies, one truth had just spoken. And this time, it had the voice of a child who refused to be silent. Nearly 400 miles away, on the 12th floor of Granite Ridge HQ, a cold, sterile office space where LED lights never changed their hue. Elliot Vance stepped out of a weekly internal meeting just as his phone vibrated in the inside pocket of his suit. The screen showed an unfamiliar number, area code 303. He frowned. Very few people had his personal number. Fewer still would call from a civil services system. He brought the phone to his ear. A woman's voice came through, polite and utterly devoid of emotion. "Hello, Mr. Vance. I'm calling from the Caraway Heights Department of Civil Protection. We'd like to inform you that your wife, Naomi Reddick, was released this morning following an unfortunate incident that occurred last night." That single sentence made Elliot stop in his tracks. He stood motionless before the glass wall, where the skyline stretched out like a hairline fracture across the horizon. The woman on the other end kept speaking, her tone flat, rehearsed like an automated message. But Elliot could now hear only 3 words. Naomi was arrested. "Did you know she's my wife?" Elliot asked, voice low, but it struck like a stone skimming the surface of a still lake. There was a pause, exactly 2 seconds, just long enough to reveal that the caller had realized a serious mistake. But Elliot didn't need a response. He already knew. Naomi had been treated like a nobody, a body in the wrong shade of skin, pulled over in the middle of the night, and turned into a statistic. He returned to his office, locked the door, said nothing to his assistant, called no one. Instead, he opened his computer, accessed the interagency privilege system, and navigated to the section for federal employee misconduct investigations. Not a single line mentioned my wife. Not one word betrayed this as a personal matter. It simply read, "A civilian was stopped, assaulted, and detained without formal charge." He filled out the fields. Urgent request to review legality of civilian traffic stops in Caraway Heights between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. Reason: suspected abuse of authority, failure to follow standard warning procedures, and potential violation of 14th Amendment civil rights. Requested materials: dashcam and bodycam footage, list of involved personnel, detainment records, supervisory reports. Priority level: Tier 1. Submitted by Privilege Code 082 V/Elliot Vance. He reviewed each line 3 times, then hit send. Next, Elliot opened a private extraction window, a classified system used to aggregate and analyze internal behavior patterns. He searched the name, Rhett Maddox. No results. He adjusted the query, Caraway Heights Police Department plus use of force. A list appeared. Next to the entries marked closed due to lack of evidence. One name stood out, Noel Bradford. 2020, non-compliant. Shoulder fracture. No footage. Elliot slowly shut his eyes, exhaling through gritted teeth like he was trying to trap something rising in his chest. They truly didn't know she was his wife. And that, he realized, was the only reason the system dared to act so boldly. But their mistake was letting him find out. And now that he knew, the layers of protection would begin to crack. Not out of vengeance, but because of a question he would not let rest. How many other Naomis have been slammed onto sidewalks, simply because they assumed no one would rise for her? He typed the final line, pull full patrol logs for Officer Maddox over the past 18 months, and press send. The data began pouring in less than 6 hours later. At Granite Ridge HQ, a large wall-mounted screen displayed a satellite map of Caraway Heights. Red markers blinked rapidly across the southern neighborhoods, areas with the city's highest black population. Elliot zoomed into a sector called Draymore Grove. Within a 2-mile radius, Officer Rhett Maddox had conducted 39 stops in just the first 5 months of the year. 34 of them ended with no citations, no arrests, no image records. Each entry simply read, "Administrative check. No suspicious activity found." He clicked through the files. Dry, cold data appeared. Names, times, vague reasons, suspicious behavior, loitering without purpose, initial ID unverifiable. Not a single case included image documentation. Just like Naomi's. Elliot opened another tab, pulling up civil complaints marked closed. He filtered by detained overnight, no image evidence, no further investigation. One name stopped him cold, Imani Tolles. 2019, facial injury. Detained for 7 hours. No footage, no witnesses. Case closed in 11 days. A faint handwritten note read, "Subject did not resist but exhibited attitude non-compliance." Elliot typed in another name he remembered from an old intake list. Noel Bradford. 2020. Stop reason. Did not match neighborhood profile. Outcome: dislocated shoulder. Taken to ER. Case closed due to lack of evidence. He leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the screen like he was staring down a silent ghost. Imani. Noel. Naomi. All three names. All three black. All three stopped at night. All three without footage. No witnesses. Each labeled as uncooperative. Elliot opened a secure internal archive, condensed reports from unpursued citizen complaints. A data vault few ever touched, where cries for justice were shelved for lacking signatures, lawyers, or someone with standing. He searched for a case from 2018. Case ID 4227BR. Denise Avery. Female. 32 years old. Preschool teacher. Detained for 6 hours. No resistance. No video. No medical notes despite facial injuries. The final handwritten line. Holding officer, Sergeant R. Maddox. No footage. No witnesses. No truth. Just one common denominator. They vanished from the system. Not because they were silent, but because the system was never designed to listen. Elliot zoomed in on the map image. Every red dot marked an incident involving Rhett Maddox. Each one represented a person, a story never written into a formal complaint. He quietly exported the map, adding it to a new file labeled Behavioral Pattern Chart, Caraway Heights / Rhett Maddox. Just then his phone buzzed softly. An internal message appeared. A handwritten letter arrived at the office with no return address. Note on the envelope, for authorized eyes only. Elliot stood up. A strange sensation welled up in him. As if among the ghosts the system had tried to erase, someone had survived and was beginning to speak. He opened the sealed letter, taped shut with aged brown packing tape. No postmark. No sender. Inside was a stack of yellowed printed pages and a faded black and white photo. A black woman with a long bruise stretching from her temple to her jawline, swollen eyes looking away from the lens. On the back, handwritten in ink, Denise Avery, taken in ER, March 2021, Holloway Parish, Alabama. Beneath it, shaky handwriting read, "I don't know who she is, but I know that look. I had that look once. I was pulled from my car for not answering fast enough, for not looking like I belonged here. They beat me, held me overnight, and no one believed me. But now I see her, your wife, and I know I'm not crazy. This system isn't broken. It's working exactly as it was designed to." Elliot stared at the letter, heart tightening. He folded the pages and opened a secure digital mapping interface exclusive to Granite Ridge HQ. Software designed to model behavioral patterns and connection probabilities within law enforcement units. Each stop over the last 3 years was tagged with an ID, sorted by location, time, and officer. He filtered for all records related to Rhett Maddox. A 3D map of Caraway Heights filled the screen, with the Draymore Grove area glowing bright red, like an open wound on the city's skin. Each red dot, a stop with no image evidence. Each green dot, a case with proper documentation, mostly clustered in the affluent northern districts. What chilled Elliot was Maddox's precision. He almost never acted in areas with traffic cameras and always chose the window between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., the legal blind spot, the time of few complaints, fewer witnesses. Elliot zoomed in on a tiny detail, the corner of Cedar and Whitmore, behind an abandoned church. 11 stops had occurred there in the last 4 months. He reviewed each case. Every person stopped was black, all labeled non-compliant but non-threatening. The map read like a clinical diagnosis, a process designed to repeat without trace. Elliot leaned on the desk, eyes fixed on the screen. He didn't break the system, he muttered. He understands it better than the people who built it. Then came the breaking point. He activated the fourth data layer, footage from private security cameras. A network of local businesses had secretly installed their own cameras for theft prevention. Elliot contacted Granite Ridge's lead tech officer immediately. Pull me all Whitmore camera footage from the Sentinel system. 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Last 90 days. The system retrieved nearly 10 clips. The fourth made Elliot sit bolt upright. On screen, under the dim glow of patrol car taillights, Maddox dragged a woman from the driver's seat to the ground. No warrant. No Miranda rights. A child scrambled out of the back seat, flailing, only to be pulled away by another officer. Elliot zoomed in. It was Naomi. The scene from that night, indisputable evidence. He pressed the lock button on the footage and stored it in a secure file labeled Omega String 378A. Then he exhaled for the first time in hours. His fight now had a face. And when truth has a face, the system can no longer hide in the dark. Elliot printed multiple copies of the footage, each stamped with a unique identifier. He placed them in 3 separate envelopes, one addressed to the National Integrity Commission, one to the Office of Special Investigations in Washington, and one to the chair of the Homeland Security Council. Each included the same opening letter. What you are about to view is not an isolated act of misconduct. It is a deliberate, repeatable pattern, a procedure operating with precision, designed to profit from silence and the invisibility of the law. This was no longer personal. Elliot knew that better than anyone. A man like Rhett Maddox couldn't have built such a calculated pattern of abuse alone. He was protected, groomed, and chosen to maintain an order not of justice, but of fear. Inside his small third-floor office at Granite Ridge, Elliot pinned a massive board full of maps, screen captures, timelines, and bold handwritten notes in black ink. No one sees the whole picture until someone puts the pieces together. He called someone he used to work with at the GAO, the Government Accountability Office. Sandra Pritchard, a federal policy analyst, once suspended for requesting a financial trace on a police department. The moment Elliot said Rhett Maddox, there was a pause. Then she replied, "Send everything, not through official channels." 3 hours later, a GAO drone landed at Pinehurst Base. A high-level liaison stepped off, took the documents, and left behind just 3 words. The operation has begun. But Elliot didn't stop there. He sent a 4th packet to Renee Voss, an independent journalist known for exposing law enforcement misconduct, once forcing a police chief to resign with just 3 leaked audio clips. He didn't write a long email, just a subject line. If you ever wondered why Denise Avery was never mentioned, this is why. To ensure the evidence couldn't be buried, Elliot uploaded the full archive to the National Secure Repository under the code. Access Tier Sigma 1. Code Vanta Presence. That clearance is reserved only for documents tied to citizen security and systemic covert investigations. Any attempt to delete, alter, or delay it would be automatically tracked. After nearly 36 straight hours of work, Elliot finally removed his glasses and rubbed his forehead. Night wind slipped through the cracked window, rustling the wall of photos. The faces of victims the system tried to erase. They had all once been silent, not because they were weak, but because no one had ever truly listened. This time was different. He turned and looked at Naomi, asleep in the chair beside him, arms wrapped around a still warm printed file. In the glow of the desk lamp, the bruise on her neck no longer looked like a mark of harm. It looked like a warning. No one was allowed to forget. And now, America would have to look. 3 days after Elliot submitted all files to the federal agencies, Naomi received a large envelope from the North Carolina State Office of Internal Affairs. The header read, "Request for Cooperation in Internal Investigation, Case No. FCR 491/NC Redstone." Believing it to be the first step toward justice, Naomi brought her ER report from Prescott General, photographs of her injuries, and a detailed written account of that night. Elliot prepared everything meticulously. Even the decrypted Sentinel footage was printed frame by frame. The cooperation session took place in room 3B of the Redstone County Administration Building, a windowless space with a cold steel table and 2 rigid metal chairs. Facing Naomi were 3 people: a lawyer from the Executive Discipline Committee, a representative from the District Attorney's Office, and a middle-aged man with a badge-reading independent advisor, though no one explained who he was. The session didn't begin with an apology. It began with a file dropped in front of her and a cold question. We want to understand whether your behavior could have been perceived as provocative at the time of the incident. Naomi stayed calm. I was dragged from my car, punched in the face, and handcuffed in front of my child. And you're asking how I provoked that? The man on the left said nothing. Just flipped to the next page. Did you refuse to comply? Did you curse? Did you make any gestures that might have made Officer Maddox feel threatened? Naomi clenched her fists. The only thing I said was, I'm driving my son home from the hospital. Then I was assaulted. The female attorney scribbled something and asked, do you have a prior record? Have you ever been pulled over by police before? It wasn't a question meant to seek truth. It was bait for a flaw, a crack to justify the unjust. Naomi knew it. They weren't looking for justice. They were building a defense narrative. Midway through, Naomi asked to submit her medical records. The DA's rep barely glanced at them before sliding them back across the table. There's no independent witness verifying these injuries occurred during police contact. Naomi's voice rose, sharp, furious. I was assaulted, and you're saying it doesn't count unless someone watched it happen. The independent advisor finally spoke, his voice low but weighted. I don't doubt that you believe what you're saying is true, but we need objectivity. And objectivity means both sides could be wrong. Naomi stood up. She couldn't sit in that room for another second. Then let me ask you this, she said, voice steady. If the woman being beaten was your wife or your mother, would you still need 3 cameras and a perfect statement to believe her? Silence. No one answered. Naomi left the room without taking a single copy of the report. Outside, Elliot was already waiting. When he saw the shattered look in her eyes, he didn't ask. He just opened the car door and gave a small nod. On the drive back, Naomi whispered, they didn't ask what I needed. They only asked what I did wrong. Elliot responded slowly, as if making a vow. Then we'll make sure next time they're the ones being asked, in front of the whole country. 4 days after the so-called cooperation interview, Naomi Reddick received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the line introduced herself as Verna Chase, a special legal advisor from the Redstone Civil Complaints Office. Her tone was gentle, almost consoling. We've reviewed the file and understand the incident has severely impacted your physical and emotional health, Verna said. As a gesture of goodwill, the agency would like to propose a quick, private resolution. The next morning, Naomi arrived at the Granite Annex Administrative Building for the closed-door meeting. The room was softly lit, paneled in polished wood. A file folder was already waiting on the table. Elliot sat beside her, his face unreadable. Verna smiled with professional warmth. We're offering a compensation package of $75,000. This includes medical expenses, emotional distress, and a confidentiality agreement. No disclosure to press or social media. Naomi glanced down at the contract. $75,000. Enough to cover Zion's tuition through middle school. Enough to take time off work. Enough to move on, as people like to say. But her eyes caught on a line at the bottom of page 3. Party A agrees not to make any public statements regarding the incident in any form. Elliot gently squeezed her hand. You can do whatever feels right for you. I'll support it. Naomi thought of that night. Of Zion's face watching his mother get dragged out of the car. Of the ER nurse who had quietly placed a hand on her shoulder and whispered, if you stay silent, someone else will go through this too. She picked up the pen, signed the acknowledgement of having read the terms. But when she reached the final signature line, she paused. Mrs. Chase, Naomi said softly, I have a 6-year-old son. I've taught him to be polite, to do the right thing, to believe in the law. But if I sign this, I'm teaching him a different lesson. Verna's smile barely shifted. You have the right to decline, but you should know going public can come with consequences. The media isn't always kind to victims. Naomi stood, sliding the contract back across the table. If I don't tell my story, someone else will rewrite it, and I won't let that happen. Verna gave a quiet nod. She didn't argue, didn't encourage. She just looked down, her eyes dimming slightly. Silent. Naomi walked out. As the door shut behind her, she felt lighter than she had in months. Elliot looked at his wife, eyes locking onto the moment. You just chose the harder path. Naomi nodded as they walked the cold stone hallway. No, I just chose the right one. And as they stepped outside, the late afternoon sun slanted through the arches of Granite Ridge HQ. Naomi knew their fight was just beginning, but this time, she would be the one holding the pen. 3 days after Naomi Reddick refused to sign the silence agreement, a new anonymous account appeared on the internal healthcare forum for Caraway Heights employees. The username, RZ Witness. No real name, no photo, just a long post that began. I'm a nurse. I was pulled from my car at 1 a.m. My son was crying. I was handcuffed for no reason. The post went viral, not for its rage, but for its quiet familiarity. It sounded like something too many had lived through, but never dared to say out loud. Replies flooded in. A man from East Redstone wrote, 2019, pulled over because I looked uncooperative. My pregnant wife was forced out of the car. No one was punished. A college student from Fairburn shared, told to pop my trunk at 11 p.m. because my music was a little loud. I asked, what law did I break? The answer, something feels off. Each story was different in detail, but the core was the same. Black, at night, no clear reason. And the same question, echoing like a skipping tape. Did I look suspicious? Naomi read every word late into the night, long after Zion had fallen asleep and Elliot was still buried in case files outside. None of the people posting their stories knew one another. No one was famous. They were engineers, students, nurses, drivers, teachers. They had broken no laws, committed no crimes, except for living in a skin color that didn't match the expectations of a distorted system. Naomi began compiling each story into a private encrypted file and sent it to Darius. He replied with one simple line. We don't just have an incident anymore. Now we have a pattern. And patterns can't be denied. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table, a mug of cold tea by her side, eyes locked on the screen as new anonymous testimonies kept pouring in. She didn't feel alone anymore. And, somehow, that made it hurt even more because this should never have been considered normal. In a note she drafted in preparation for a possible hearing, Naomi wrote a single line. We're not asking for privilege. We just don't want our children to grow up learning how to avoid suspicion. That sentence would later appear on the cover of a federal investigation report. But in that moment, it was simply the rawest truth Naomi could write. Not a scream, not a slogan, just a plea from people who had spent their lives having to prove their innocence, even when they were never accused. 3 weeks after the anonymous forum exploded, Naomi received an email in her encrypted inbox. The subject line read, Hearing summons, special session per section 4-73B, U.S. Department of Justice. This wasn't a closed-door interrogation. It wasn't a backroom negotiation. It was a public hearing broadcast nationwide from the main hall of Draymore Grove Federal Court, a place where once silenced voices would echo across an entire country. And this time, it wouldn't be the victims who had to prove anything. Naomi didn't wear her nurse's scrubs that day. She entered the hall in a simple dark dress and the same flat shoes she wore during night shifts. At her side was Elliot, his hand gently holding hers like a silent promise. Zion wasn't with them. He was home, watched over by their trusted neighbor. But Naomi knew that every word she was about to say would become part of the world her son would grow up in. When invited to speak, Naomi didn't rise immediately. She took a deep breath, then stepped forward and opened with 3 words. We have waited. Below her, microphones pivoted, keyboards clattered, and all across America, from homes in South Dakota to newsrooms in New York, people were listening. Naomi didn't lean into the pain. She didn't have to. What she shared, the 1 a.m. traffic stop, Zion's terrified cries, the cold steel of handcuffs, the internal silence from the agency, the hush money offers, was vivid truth. And no one could look away. The question is no longer, what did I do to deserve this? She said, her voice steady and calm. The question is, why did you think you had the right to do this and not be questioned? Behind her, Darius Morgan watched quietly from a side bench. He didn't need to be on camera because the maps, statistics, and records he had submitted to the investigative committee were already among the most damning pieces of evidence. When Naomi finished, The hall fell into breathless silence. No applause. But everyone understood, from that moment on, the rules had changed. No longer would the burden be on victims to prove their innocence. The system itself would have to prove it was still worthy of trust. Under the full glare of national cameras, Naomi stepped down from the podium as quietly as she had ascended. But every step, every word, every second of her silence had already become something no one could erase. And in a country where justice had long been measured by silence, truth had finally begun to speak.